Hello, hello, everyone. It is Kenyon here, Basketball Rewind, and I said that I would talk to you guys after Canada won, and Canada won. I didn't actually say after Canada would win, but I did say it would be after the next game. For anyone who actually stayed up and watched the game, kudos to you, because it was an early one. It would have been nice if they were in the gold medal game. They are bringing back hardware, so spoiler alert, if you haven't seen the game, they did beat the Americans 127 to 118, of course. But again, it would have been nice to watch the other game because the other game happened a little bit later at a more reasonable time. Um, so with that being said, some of these games were really, really challenging to watch. I watched as many as I could, but it was challenging just because of the time zone difference. And of course, the older that you get, if you're no longer, you know, the age of 18 to 23, I would say, usually sleep tends to catch up on you and it takes a little bit of time for you to recover. With that being said, I don't really want to, I guess we decide we're not really going to go too much into the game, but Shai showed throughout this tournament, because I also think that him and I believe Dennis Schroeder were both on the All-Star team for the FIBA World Cup because they have like your top five players. I also believe was Franz on the team? I don't know if anyone remembers that.
He was not on the first team.
He was not on the first team. The other thing. Oh, sorry, Beyond.
Schroeder was MVP, so let's give a shout out to our newest raptor.
Yes, he was. Yes,
best player in the world today.
Yes, the crown is on.
No allowed. That is what you call world champion, right?
The world
yes,
champion.
Yes. So yeah, what I will say is that there's a few interesting things that I want to talk about as we kind of dive into this discussion. We're obviously going to continue on with the game, but I also want to talk about roster construction a bit more looking forward. I think that Canada has some advantages there, in terms of their ability to put together a team. But yeah. One of the things that I noticed, and this was no difference here, Canada tends to play at times up to the level of their competition in terms of the energy that they come out in a game with. They came out with a fire and a passion. So instead of the opposite happening, where usually you're coming out and you don't need to have a fire lit under the behind, basically. I found that this time, for once, they weren't fighting and exerting energy to get a lead. Instead, they were focused on maintaining the lead, and it was kind of, yes, it was a close game throughout at times, but they maintained control. It's a lot easier to maintain control in that manner. Also talk really briefly about Shai Gilgeous-Alexander, and of course, Dillion Brooks, of course. But Shai, I think, showed a really strong ability throughout this tournament, but especially in the final game, to really learn how to manage the game throughout. I think that he got people involved. I think he really grew as really a game manager. I don't really have another way of describing it. I mean, he obviously has an ability to play with different changes of pace, but with this game, what I found is that instead of as opposed to some of the other games where he goes a little bit too ISO heavy, and obviously some of that is team construction, I did find that he did a good job of balancing getting others involved as well as getting involved himself. Really quickly, shout out to the boxing man, Dillion Brooks, of course, the man of the hour, the man who deserves his flowers. So yeah, I think if I'm not mistaken, he had, was it 39 points?
39.
Yes, so it was 39 points. It was efficient, and it was good to see. There's a few other things that I wanted to talk about, like minutes and stuff like that, but do you guys have any thoughts?
Coach, you actually stay up to watch this, so you have the honor, my friend.
This game, I woke up because I taped it and then I watched in the morning.
Smart.
People that they feel like an Iron Man's like, yeah, man, watch. Yeah.
That was just the Serbia game. I woke up early for that, but that's all right.
Yeah.
Dillion Brooks scored 39 points. It's a Canadian men's team record that I know of, and it's the second highest, I think, FIBA World Cup point total since like Dirk hit like 47 one game. I don't know how many years ago it was, but Dillion Brooks has the second highest, I don't know, in the last 20 years or something like that. The way that he was just shooting the basketball, like it was like he could not miss. Like he was 7 of 8 from three, so he shot was that 88% from three against the Americans. But just kind of watching that game, that wasn't a FIBA game. That was an NBA game. It wasn't as physical as compared to the other games. Like Serbia and Spain was physical. Canada. Even when the Americans played Germany and Lithuania, like those teams were so physical with them. To me, it was more of an NBA game. The defense, I mean, what was that? I think the final score was 127 to 118. Like that's a little less than an NBA game. Most of these FIBA games have been like 95 to 90 or something like that. I know it went into overtime, but overtime's only 5 minutes, so they didn't score a whole lot, both teams. But I just think this is a big deal for Canadian basketball, especially on the men's side. It's been a long time. It's been over 20 years since they went to the Olympics, and I think they finished fifth that year in the Olympics. And I really think we're in a golden age now of Canadian basketball on the men's side. Shai Gilgeous-Alexander, in my opinion, not to sound like a homer, I thought he was the best player in the tournament, bar none. Shout out to Schroeder for winning the MVP. He deserved it. Franz Wagner, he's good. He's really good. And Anthony Edwards was really good in this tournament. Bogdanovic for Serbia. I just felt that Shai was the best player all around. He led the Canada in rebounding. He led them in scoring. He led them in assists. He was the number one option. The guy barely sat off in any of the games. Like he basically played more or less all of the games, a ton of minutes. That's a lot in this type of tournament. You go from a grueling 82 game season to playing like 38 minutes in this in the 40-minute game. It's a lot for sure. But I'm just really pleased with how well they've done. Looking forward, we still have some more players to add, but this was a great coming out party for Team Canada. Looking forward to the 2024 Olympics in Paris.
Hey, just a jumping off point for what Coach said, just to give some more perspective on what they accomplished. I heard this on NBA radio yesterday, yeah. So this is the first time Canada has medaled since. But the folks at home, let's put it this way. A little man with a mustache in this case was the head of a country in this case at the time, and Jesse Owens was the star of the Olympics when it happened. 1936 yep. Berlin.
I was going to say Mussolini, but I mean, it's still in the same.
Down the street in this case. Silver medal. So that shows you to give you some perspective of what we're dealing with here. As far as the game itself, I mean, pretty much the two teams are looking at each other in the mirror, actually. They're really very similar how they're built, the way they want to play. They both want to get up and down. They both have a lot of great athletes. They both want a fast break. They both are pretty small up front, and much more mobile up front and stuff like that. So, I think shot blocking wise, the U.S. have an advantage for that start in the interior. But I would say in this case, I think from shot making standpoint, I don't think Canada's that far off with this particular team from them. So built very similar. I don't think there's really another team that built quite like that, like the two of them. And it shows you a bit of the cultural differences between the European style way, how they build a team versus how the North American style is a building team, which is interesting. I guess it's like you build what you have, right? In this case here. So it is fascinating from that standpoint. SGA, it's going to be interesting to see what happens for a few of these guys. You mentioned kind of, you want to call them, they're stars already, but breakout stars in this case, you want to say for this tournament. We've seen it happen in previous tournaments. I remember Kevin Garnett at FIBA. I think the following year he might have won MVP. I think that following year he was, as a possibility. Also, too, Vince Carter. That was Afro Vince, and it was a pleasure to watch as he was just taking numbers and just tattooing folks everywhere on the court. Right? There's certain players that come out of these things where they take in flight. They take in flight. Take a bit of playing with words here and then and SGA. I think Franz. It'll be interesting to see what some of these guys, and even Schroeder to a lesser extent, what comes out of it after this tournament and how they see themselves and what type of roles they have on their teams in the NBA. So that's gonna be fascinating to watch. And even I guess Dylan Brooks, which you might have to rein back a little bit in with email. I don't know. That's gonna be fascinating the other way. But that will also be an interesting experience to see what happens in Houston with him. But as far as to give a little love to Brooks, I think he had a fantastic tournament in his own right. The shooting was incredible. They packed it in on Canada as everyone expects. That's the playbook. He took the shots that were there, and as Coach said, he knocked down everything. All of a sudden, he walked out the booth, and he was Steph Curry all of a sudden, and he was knocking down everything in sight. It's interesting. There's a little story about that, about how he's shooting. I think he's been working at the Raptors facility and a lot of that.
I heard it.
Yeah, I heard that. Yeah, from give shout out there to Thorpe and the True Hoop guys about what type of system. And that's more like I think Kenyon's into that type of stuff. Sure, he's all over it already. What he was using, I think the Noah system or whatever it was. Yeah. So I don't know what they're doing in Memphis, but I'll leave that be. But overall, he looked really good. I am curious to see how this plays out in the future and what role he has with the team moving forward to the Olympics. Because I think that's going to be fascinating to see what role he plays moving forward. But kudos to the guys. Very happy. I thought that worst case scenario in my mind was make the Olympics was worst case scenario. I thought this team could medal, and they have medals. So shout out to the fellas, man.
I mean, so I'll go into a slightly different direction here, and I'll talk about the minutes. One of the things looking at this game, which is interesting, is I think 3 or 4. I just want to make sure. Yeah, so 3. We had 3 players that played more than any other American player. Okay. That's something that is, I guess you can get away with it in a 9 game tournament like the Olympics will be across 15 days. I would prefer that we don't do that though. Especially if you don't need to. And I'm not talking for some of the minutes, it's like 37 versus 40. Like literally Shai outside of, grabbing a sip of water, and maybe just wiping his brow, played the whole game. Dylan Brooks practically played the entire game. Remember, people, FIBA, I know it is a we had an overtime in this one, but FIBA is a 40-minute game. So he basically played a whole game. I think to kind of transition into what's looking forward is that, I mean, we talked about this the last time, but I mean, this is what you invested so heavily in this program for, is to get to this moment. And I really hope that they make the right decisions. I understand that there is a hope. I know Jonathan asked some really good questions about chemistry and stuff, but with that being said, I think we not only have the amount of talent, but also I think we have the right collection of talent. Interestingly enough, I think of the role players that kind of jump the gun here, but we have a lot of role players in the NBA that would fit really nicely here. And you look at guys like, I think he got injured before, but O'Shea Brissett. He probably would have been very useful in this tournament, right? You look at some up and coming guys as well who would be probably useful in this tournament. And so I think we have a collection of guys who I don't really see people coming in with an ego into the Olympic team, especially with a chance to add to their resume. And I know people are going to freak out about the whole Wiggins thing, and what he basically said, if they make the Olympics, he's going to play. So he's going to play. I don't know what there is to tell you.
I said already, man, last one. I said if Steve Eisman in 1986 was somehow we were debating if he should be on the Canada Cup team, we would be all scratching our head wondering, like, what are you talking about? Of course he would be on the team in this case here. So, like, the Wiggins discussion or discourse makes no sense to me. He's arguably the third best player in the country. Yes, if he wants to play, and if he can play, he should be on the roster. There's no kind of like, well, we'll see. No. Who are we going to go and say, like, you know what, you should get play in this case here, but, we'll keep that spot open in this case for O'Shea Brissett? Like, come on, what are we doing here, folks?
Yeah. And I know Jordy did say what he said in terms of they have the right of first refusal or whatever, fair enough. But I think that some of these decisions go above him in terms of the actual creation of the team. I understand that as a coach, you got to be loyal to your guys. At the same time, Jordy coming in with a month to spare or whatever to try to coach it to a meddling team, which, as you said, we haven't seen since the Mustache Man was around. Okay. At that point, it's been a minute. So I would like to see him have the tools to be able to succeed and go as far as he can, because the Olympics only come around every so often. You were going to say, Beyond.
Yeah, I wanted to kind of follow up with that and I think what we're discussing here, and I don't want to put words in coach's mouth, but I know in our last discussion is building up the depth of this team. And what I think it solves is a few things. One is the minutes, as you discussed. You got more depth. Obviously, you shouldn't have to play guys 37, 39, 40 minutes. Two, it makes better role definition, because if folks thinks we could roll with this team thinking we have to get 30 from Dillion Brooks in the Olympics, I wish you all luck with that. No respect to Dillion Brooks. He's had his day. And I'm giving him all his flowers today and then some. But let's face it, folks. We should not be counting on Dillion Brooks to give us almost 40. In this case here, that scenario is not happening again, okay? It's like having Christmas in July. It ain't happening again. The third part about it is the part you mentioned at the beginning, and this is you mentioned how the slow starts happen, right? And I think how we play up and down our competition. But I think that is also it happens because if you look at how this team is constructed, this team goes on the whims of Dillion Brooks in this case here. So if Dillion Brooks is ready and he's looking like he's ready to go after it like a big dog that day, Team Canada follows suit. Because SGA is like this. No matter what the situation, he can be like this. But if you're usually that's what happens with every team. It's your second guy that determines what your ceiling is going to be, not your first guy. First guy's going to do his thing all the time. It's what that second guy does. And if Dillion Brooks at this point is the second guy on this team, it's not a surprise that when Dillion Brooks has 4 games where he's feeling a little out of it, well, we struggle in this case here. But he was geared up like looking for raw meat for the U.S. He was looking for his old teammate. He was looking for him that day on the court. So he was fired up to play them, right? So it goes with the flow. And if you have more talent, a la Murray or Wiggins, and you don't have to worry about going the whims and the ups and downs of Dillion Brooks, because you have the talent now that says, hey, this is what we're going to be every day, because we know these 3 dudes are going to give me 65 to 70 points every night. And
that's a good point. I'm gonna look out for that in the NBA season this year as well. For the
You look at any team and look at the second dude, and if his second dude, the less consistent he is, even the great Lakers, what mood is Anthony Davis in that day?
That is true. Which I mean,
how high the Lakers are going to go. If he's in a good mood that day, 6 blocks, 25 points. Hey, here we go, 14 boards.
Yeah. I mean, not to completely derail it, but it's interesting because there was the news about the Lakers are finally promising him that he will play less of a center. As I said to people, he's a center. I know he doesn't like to play center, but he's a center. And this U.S. team could use a center, but regardless of whether he wants to play or not. Coach.
Yeah. And just building on what Beyond said about depth is going to be important moving forward. But I see from multiple standpoints. One is, for most of this tournament, we were in foul trouble. It's only the Americans game that we weren't in foul trouble, because that was an NBA game. They just let them play, run up and down. There's not much physicality. In that game against Serbia, Jordy basically went 7 deep, as he has been doing. And that lack of depth showed when we lost to them by about 9 points. Did we play well in general? No, not really. But we were in so much foul trouble that when Jordy, he'd had his Nick Nurse moment, he just looked at the bench like, man, who do I trust now? That's what I actually noticed throughout this tournament. He had his Nick Nurse experience that he had with the Raptors. He's looked at the bench like, man, who do I trust? And then you got guys like Shai playing 38 minutes a game, and then Brooks played 42. I know in the game against the Americans, which he deserved. RJ played 38 minutes in that game, but that was kind of a constant theme throughout the tournament. But if you add depth to this team, so you add a Brandon Clark, and you add a Trey Lyles or a Nemhard or Mathurin, and then Wiggins, Murray, and stuff like that, you won't have to worry so much about foul trouble when you play Serbia or Lithuania or Spain in the Olympics. Depth is going to be so important because with these European teams, it's going to get really physical, right? With the Americans, it may not stuff like that because they're just going to play the NBA style ball. But just building what Beyond said, depth is going to be important. And if I'm an NBA executive, if I'm Sam Presti, I'm watching this tournament, I see the amount of minutes Shai's playing. You don't think he's a little bit concerned over that? I think he might
Just
be.
a little bit, but I mean, it'd be nice if he also got his teammates to play finally too. So,
Well, I would also say Sam Presti must be shocked to actually see him play more than 30 minutes because he always shuts him down by about the time All-Star game comes anyway. So,
it's true.
what, you played this many minutes? Really? I'm shocked. Apart.
I have a final question for you guys, and then we'll close out this episode, of course. So the question is in terms of who was the biggest stock raiser, or who had their stock rise the most amount from this tournament. I will give you 3 names, and you can rank them: Jordy, Brooks, and Dennis Schroeder.
May I go?
Oh yeah, of
Go
course.
for it.
I think that's Brooks.
Okay.
I mean, considering when your team that left, you pretty much put out in a press release that we have no interest in this case of following up. Whoever is it. Like,
That's
I mean, that's the
nasty.
most disrespectful. Usually, you just kind of say, "Well, you know what, we had." You don't even say anything most of the time. But if you do say something, you just say, "Hey, you know what? It just kind of we moved on, and we wish him the best of luck and blah blah." That's it. When you go out your way and say that, that's such a disrespectful thing. And the thing I said at the time, I think we had a bit. We might talk about this offline. I'm not sure we had a Morant show per se. Again, we kind of made it aside. But my point was at the time, what I didn't like, and I'm not saying I'm no Dylan Brooks fan overall, but I didn't like how they kind of try to slide and put everything on him as if he was the issue in Memphis. When he was like a side issue. Dylan Brooks does that nonsense all the time. That's not what cost you the season. But you don't want to face what will cost you the season. That's number 12. You don't want to deal with that. But you want to kind of just slide everything to Dylan Brooks. Oh, he's the one who's messing everything up. It's like, oh, really? And I thought I kind of did him dirty in that sense. Where it's like, yeah, okay, he's talking. What did he do? He talks smack to LeBron. What are you supposed to say out there? You look a cup of tea, LeBron? Like, no, I mean, so be it. And you got whooped. A lot of guys got whooped by LeBron in the last 20 years.
I was going to say against the Raptors, it'd be if he would want some wine on the side of the.
Right.
Anyways,
the Raptors with
or beer.
But ask people money in this case if they can stop LeBron. Like, I mean, at least he was out there looking to fight a little bit. But when it's said and done, he got whooped. No shame in that. But I think that's the reason why you lost or your season came apart. No, my friends, that's not why. So from my standpoint, he raised his level up in his stock, not only to where it was prior to all the nonsense in Memphis, but I think it's gone up a level more now where it's like, oh, this guy actually could be a bit of a threat more offensively again. Because people forget, like Dylan Brooks only a couple of years ago having 18 or 19 a game. The people act like Dylan Brooks is some guy, he's Draymond Green, he's a triple single. And he's
I mean, the only thing that I don't like about Dylan Brooks in terms of as an NBA player would be at times his shot selection. That's really it.
Oh, yeah. Well, Dylan Brooks is the classic example. I mean, there's guys like this throughout the eras in this case, man. You don't, there's certain guys you don't want to get too hot. You really don't want to get that hot. You can't turn them off once they start shooting. They get 3 or 4 to go in. Yeah. There's been guys like that throughout history. It's like, oh Lord, he's got 5 straight. Watch out, right? So that's my thing with him. But overall, I think his stock, he's really improved his stock overall in the NBA community and basketball community overall. So I think he's my choice.
Okay. And the other between the other two, Jordy and Schroeder.
I will put it this way: I think Schroeder has made things very uncomfortable in this case of Raptors. I'll just leave it at that.
Fair enough. Stay tuned on Basketball Rewind for that. Yeah. And by the way, just before you go, Coach, I will say we definitely have had confirmations that Trey is interested in coming back and discussing OG on this channel. So we will definitely be doing that at some point soon. Coach.
My list is Dylan Brooks, certainly number one. How this season ended for him in Memphis, certainly tough. Quite disrespectful the way Memphis did it, but Memphis they had the whole Jaw saga throughout the year. It just, as good as they were, you could see it unravel towards the end of the year. Um, when
Yeah.
Dylan Brooks, I've said this on the show, when he is taking these undisciplined fouls, it is very difficult because he is good. He makes a difference. Like the plus minus throughout this whole tournament, his ability to shoot, his ability to play defense. But sometimes it's so difficult when he takes these silly fouls. It's like, what are you doing? It's almost like you get frustrated because he's important. He can play. So I think his stock, he needed this for kind of that resurgence of his career. And, hopefully he's able to do it next year in Houston. Um, my close second is Schroeder. And as Beyond said, things just get a lot interesting in Toronto right now. The best point guard in this tournament was Dennis Schroeder, like outside of Shea, I'll say that. So I kind of view Shea as his off ball guy mainly, but anyways. Schroeder was, I guess, the MVP of this tournament, and the number showed he played very, very well. You can make an argument that Shea had more help around him than Schroeder did. If you wanted to, I think it's debatable. So certainly Schroeder and Jordy stock rose too. I mean, that he's in third place for me, but he's going to be a head coach in the NBA because of this tournament. And if it's not going to be probably after the Olympics, actually, I think he'll have a chance to be a head coach because coaches are getting fired all the time now, man. If you're not producing within a year or two, even if you get a rebuilding team, man, they're sending you out the door. Ask Steven Silas in Houston, and the only guy I've never quite understood is Steve Clifford in Charlotte.
I was just about to say somehow Steve Clifford,
and then he's back again. But Jordan's out now, so
and he's back at Charlotte again. And it's just like, what the heck?
Yeah, but no, Jordy will definitely get a job, and not that it's so much Raptors related, but we all know he was a finalist for the job and lost to Darko. So there's going to be a bit of a Raptor narrative in there this year. It's not to put pressure. Yeah, it's not to put pressure on Darko so much because I know
Are
they're
you
two different
suggesting that
situations,
he's better at checking his emails or anything about? Nah, okay,
look, I think the two guys got put on notice a little bit. I mean, Darko's one. I think in this case, they're a little bit. I've been learning about all through this tournament about Nick Nurse, how this team would look if Nick Nurse was coaching it. I don't know. I ain't trying to put shade on Nick Nurse. He won a championship with us, but I'm not sure if this team is getting a medal with Nick Nurse as coaching this team. I really don't. I really question that, and not necessarily offensively, because I'm not sure if he would have done anything different at Jordy, but defensively, I don't know if because the type of personnel like Nick Nurse is like there's some coaches in this case are adapting when someone was supposed to think of their stuff as like a religion, and Nick Nurse thinks of his philosophy as a religion. Like
I've hinted at it with the whole him and Phil Jackson connection.
Yeah. Mm-hmm.
Where they're very
regimented on what they think is the way to play basketball and how they think it should be played. And I think he's trying to put a square peg in a round hole. And with this team here, he would try to do it again. And I'm sitting here, he had guys trapping all sorts of crazy places, just exposing the back end, left, right, and center. We got no shot blocker worthwhile to be playing that type of defense. And never not on the bench. And I'm just sitting here shaking my head like, nah, you think we were in foul trouble with this team? I don't know, man. We had some dudes. We've been checking the scorecard and check the sheet. Who's this dude coming off the bench?
Yeah, I mean, we'll save this for another conversation, but I'm very curious because we're probably going to do not rankings, but the I guess power rankings or whatever of the Eastern and Western standings of the Eastern Western Conference. As they are quote unquote today or whatever. But yeah, it is really interesting, and I was going to mention Philly is very interesting because Nick Nurse's recent comments about how he's planning on using Joel Embiid, which I'm not surprised by, but I'm interested in seeing that because Joel Embiid, cardio-wise, he better be on the treadmill today. With that being said, that has been a great conversation, in my opinion. Stay tuned for other conversations. First of all, people, I believe this might come out before then, so I will say I have a Malachi Flynn interview that I actually was able to score. That's going to come up. Don't worry, people. It's a little short interview. It's only 4 minutes, but it is an interview nevertheless. I also have we have the Scotty Barnes, everyone's favorite topic, coming up, of course. So
bring them out. Here we go.
So, and of course, we're gonna have other conversations as well that aren't necessarily Raptor centric. So whether it's Raptors or otherwise, come along for the ride. Hopefully you enjoy it. I know some people have actually messaged me. They actually listen to this while they work and whatnot. Some people are asking for it with audio. I will consider an audio platform when I get monetized on YouTube. So, if one way to get me there faster, subscribe, like, and comment and share. With that being said, it's been Basketball Rewind, like I keep saying, and take care. Have a good one.